Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Dana Keep and I'm here with my colleague, Becky King. Becky and I are the alumni career advisors here at Career Education, and we are so delighted that you're joining us today. Today is our final webinar in a most unusual year. So I think we'd like to begin by finding a way to come together, even though we are all located in many locations. So if you feel so inclined, you can put a word or a phrase in the chat that describes how you're feeling about returning to the workforce after a career break, because that is our topic today. So feel free to add that to the chat if you feel like it as we are kicking off our webinar. As I'm sure most of you would agree, the pandemic has changed the world in ways that we cannot even yet see or fully describe. And it's given many people a chance to reflect on what exactly is meaningful work to them. It's also necessitated that some people return to work earlier than expected, perhaps. So today we're going to give you our best strategies for returning to work and also discuss what are some specific careers for relaunchers and how the COVID pandemic makes the job search and career reentry a little bit different. Our discussion today is going to focus on 4 areas. The first one is, where do I even begin? The second one is, how do I explore what I'm interested in? The third one is a few specific, excuse me, a few specific concerns that relaunchers have that Becky and I deal with all the time. And finally, what is different in this pandemic?
And thank you, those who are entering right now. We did just ask if you are so inclined to share a quick word or your thoughts on re-entry into the workforce. So what I've noticed is, no surprise, we're all feeling very much a combination of excitement, anxiety, intimidation, and a little bit overwhelmed, a little bit of confusion, a lot of mixed feelings. And this is to be expected. And both Dana and I have been in your shoes. And it is both exciting, a little bit scary, a little bit confusing. It can be, it builds resilience. It's a time that helps us with resilience. And of course, this whole 9-month period we've been in has been a time to build resilience after all. So we're excited to talk you through it today. And we're excited at any point if you wish to make an appointment with either one of us. This is near and dear to our hearts as we both took breaks, Dana for, I think, 12 years, myself for 8 years, to care for family. And it was scary for us and exciting for us to get back into the workforce. So sharing that, and I'm glad we are recording this, as you probably have noticed, and we'll be sending the recording link out to you and anyone else who's registered. It will also live on our website with other recorded webinars we've done. We have a YouTube channel for all of our recorded webinars, just so you know that's there. But I do think being live with us today is nice to share the communal aspect of this. So thank you for joining us and sharing. So getting started, where to begin? And if you haven't, if you're in that sort of beginning phase now, you want to be thinking about how, where, why, all of those, the key questions, what, where, why, when. But you want to also be thinking, what's best matched with my skills, my interests, my values, my personality preferences. I think it's very important to take this time. We tend to be, our society, we tend to be go-getters, ambitious, and we know from conversations with Wellesley alums, we want to be efficient, we want to get back out and get that job. But it's really important, I can't stress this enough, to really reflect and make sure you're clear on what's motivating you. And if it's, I want a work identity again, I missed that, that's a good starting point. Now, what about that? Let's delve deeper. So thinking about that, it makes me think about the business operations quote that I saw. You can't manage what you don't measure. And it works for business operations, it works for life operations, and it works for life happiness. To really be able to assess your progress, you need to measure it, and you need to know you're making progress towards your goals. And to do that, we begin internally reflecting on what I like to call my VIPs, because it's easy to remember it that way: your values, your interests, your personality preferences, and your skills or your strengths. And we have numerous worksheets and questions and exercises to help you with this reflective piece. But I do feel very strongly that's the starting point. After you've done these reflection steps and all of that, then what do you do, Dana?
Well, you're certainly not going to be looking for a job in a vacuum, right? You and your VIPs are going to be a match with something out there in the world. So, how do you very gently and casually begin exploring what's out there? We have some more deliberate ways, which we'll get to in a moment. But at the very beginning, we recommend that you simply start reading a little bit more. Read some blogs, check out some industry resources of whatever industry you're interested in online. Maybe join a group that has a chat and listen to what people are talking about. Look at company websites or organization nonprofit websites and see, how do they introduce themselves? How do they talk about what their mission is? How do they talk about the people they want to hire? This is just kind of like background reading, really, but we think it's very important because it helps to give you the lingo of what people are talking about. It might help you to update what you know. Perhaps you're returning to a field that you were in before you took a career break. And you might want to check and see, hey, what's new? Certainly scientific fields have a lot more that's new. Maybe even marketing and social media have a lot more that's new. Other fields might have less things that have been updated during your time away. But whatever it is, you're going to get updated, you're going to refresh or learn the lingo if you're looking to make a career transition or a career pivot. And so just reading and listening and researching online is a great place to start. We also recommend that you talk more casually with the people you already know, your neighbor, people that you used to work with, someone that you volunteered with in the past, some just friends that maybe you have some friends that already made a return to the workforce, and ask them, how did it go for them? What did you do? Even if they're not interested in your same industry. So the casual conversations and the background reading are terrific ways to get an idea of what's out there. And then you're going to match that with what Becky talked about, your internal reflection. And that's how we recommend to begin. I'm going to pause for a moment here to talk about a resource that we highly recommend. And it's great for anyone starting a new chapter, which certainly applies to those who are hoping to return to work after a career break. And by the way, Becky and I took time off to care for our children for our career breaks, but we understand that people might take career breaks for other reasons: to care for a parent, to do some community service, for education, for their own health issue. There are many reasons why people take career breaks. Probably we talk most to people who take career breaks for caring for their children, but certainly we understand that there are many reasons for that. So we recommend two books, Designing Your Life and Designing Your Work Life. They are written by two Stanford design school professors who've applied the principles of design thinking to career development. And design thinking is a problem-solving method which helps people create things. And the fourth step is called prototyping, which most of you are probably familiar with that. So I'm going to take that word into our next section, but I wanted to just give that little bit of introduction. So once you've done the internal reflection and the background reading, how do you actually test drive something? How do you explore, or you could say, how do you prototype? Because you want to do something that is going to give you a way to sneak a peek at the future. You want to give yourself a way to explore a little bit further about what you're thinking about. And there's really two main ways to do that.
Thanks, Dana. We did do a webinar on designing your work life, designing your life principles and all of that last summer. It's in that YouTube channel, which we'll be sharing with you all as well if you're not sure where to find it. But in terms of that thought process, in terms of trying things out and making sure it's really what you want to do, conversations, hands down, are my favorite way as an extrovert to test this out. So prototyping conversations would be akin to informational interviews. And what you want to do to prepare for informational interviews and really all of what you're about to do is create an elevator pitch. It's very important that you take all of that reflective material that you've spent the time developing and turn that into a brief. And when I say brief, I mean less than a minute, 30 seconds ideally, to describe who you are, what you'd like to do, and whether this person you're talking to might have some ideas to share with you. So if elevator pitch is not a familiar term to you, we can certainly, again, work on that individually. Each elevator pitch, I would say, is quite individual anyhow. But what you want to do is think about who you could connect with that might have some ideas for you. This can be, and obviously pre-pandemic, this was everywhere, right? You're in the supermarket, you're at the airport, you're on a bus, you're, at the soccer game. During the pandemic, yes, I was still at a soccer game, but we all had masks on and we were quite limited. But I did still have some very good conversations this fall with other mothers on the sidelines. So I do think that can be a helpful place. I think if you happen to be at the supermarket or Starbucks, you still can be listening and getting ideas. But what we're left with nowadays is largely the world of LinkedIn, Facebook, email, Zoom. And that's a pro and a con, right? So the pro is everybody's available to you anywhere, in any time zone, in any geographic location. So we have two particular places we like to go to find connections for conversations. The Wellesley Hive, if you are not already a part of that or haven't heard of it, the Wellesley Hive is something we created several years ago to enable the Wellesley community to opt in, to offer mentorship, to offer connection, camaraderie, ideas back and forth, etc. So it's a pretty robust community now of nearly 6,000 members, and we invite students, staff, faculty, and alums to be a part of it. And so that's an ideal place to begin, because you can quickly search, find like-minded individuals. And that's really the idea here, is finding people who share your interests, your passions, and are working in a field that interests you, right? And so networking, often, when you say the word networking, people often sort of, have that gut reaction of, I just don't like networking. In fact, I recently had a conversation with a Wellesley alum, and she said, look, I'm really independent. I hate to ask other people for help. And I said, well, think about it this way. It's not that you're being needy or dependent or any sort of derogatory feeling you may have about it. It's a paying it forward opportunity, right? So someone can help you right now and you'll help somebody else down the road. And it isn't about being needy, it's a necessity. And if you can think about it that way, I think it can be empowering rather than a fearful experience. So having these conversations, again, if you're not sure what, in informational interview questions to ask, use us as a sounding board. We have a lot of different ideas, and depending on your particular situation and what you're looking to learn, we can come up with some very good questions for you. I think there are really two golden questions, which would be along the lines of, if you were in my shoes after a 10-year break, 5-year break, 2-month break, whatever it is, break, and really passionate about legal aid or, using my law degree in the nonprofit arena or whatever it may be, or digital marketing or whatever your fields are. If you were me and you had all of this experience, but you had this gap and, now I want to do this, this is all your elevator pitch. What do you recommend I should be doing? And it's an open-ended question. And the other, I think, helpful question would be, and who do you suggest I should connect with? Or if you don't have specific names for me, who in terms of roles, mid-career, et cetera, right? What roles in organizations should I be identifying, focusing on? So that's one piece of the prototyping.
That's great. So those test driving conversations or prototyping conversations work because you have a reaction to them. You say, when you walk out of the conversation, or in this case, when you hit leave meeting, you say to yourself, wow, that was so much more exciting than I thought. Or, that company had interested me, but the way that person talked about it really didn't resonate with me. So you want to pay attention to those reactions. And the second way of generating some of those reactions for yourself is to do some test driving experiences or prototyping experiences. This is what we in our field, Becky and I, have always called strategic volunteering. So it could be volunteering, it could be strategic consulting gigs, it could be strategic pro bono work, but the theme is the same. So small project work or small engagements where you get a chance to test something without making a full-time commitment. We haven't yet figured out how we could do 5 jobs at once for 6 months and then choose our favorite. So this is our next best option. You want to stay with the curiosity theme here. Just as with those conversations that Becky was describing, you want to reach out to people who share your professional interests and people you're curious about. Wow, it looks like they did something really interesting, or it looks like they had a very unusual career path. And in this case, you want to think about, I'm really curious about what it would be like to work at a hospital, or I have some friends who are working at startups, and I'm just so interested. What is that environment even like? Would I like it or would I hate it? So all of these things can allow you to sneak a little peek at the future, and therefore then you can make a better decision about, the direction you're heading. So you're probably thinking now, how in the world would I find these mini experiences, these strategic gigs? And it's a great question. So in some cases, you can look at large organization websites that have volunteer opportunities and see what those volunteer opportunities are. Certainly, some of them are limited now because of the pandemic. So we understand that. And hopefully that will return soon. The other thing you can do is, in your prototyping conversations, you can be listening or even ask, what is not happening at your organization that you wish you could do because you don't have enough resources? Or someone might say, oh, we're trying to get a newsletter off the ground, but we just don't have the person power to do it. And you might say, hey, I'd love to help with that. I'm a good editor. I'd be happy to help you with that. I have about 4 hours a week for the next couple of months. Would you be open to that? So you're listening, you're asking, and you're researching online. That's how you might find some of those prototyping experiences. I want to emphasize that this is a time to be a little bit selfish. You want to choose an experience that is going to help you and the organization. We know that there are, many nonprofits or many causes out there that could use extra help, more than we can help. So choose one that's going to allow you to learn something and help the organization, and set parameters. You're not saying, okay, I'll volunteer 40 hours a week forever until I get a job here. That's never going to work. You want to have a set time. I used to suggest that if they have a big event coming up, you could say, hey, I'll help you set up the chairs all day on Saturday. Again, that's not really helpful now, but you never know who you might meet when you're setting up chairs. So keep that one in mind for the future. So you're being a bit selfish, you're setting parameters, and the reason why these experiences help additionally are the following. You might meet people you would never otherwise meet. You get to see inside of an organization. You get to test out some skills that you would like to test out or refresh. And finally, something quite overlooked, you might even eliminate an idea. And you might say, oh, that was such a waste. I did that project and I really hated it. But really and truly, that's valuable. How much better to eliminate an idea in a small test
Yeah.
than rather than, getting hired full time and working there and realizing that didn't work. So those kinds of mini experiences can really be helpful. Sometimes unpaid gigs will lead to paid gigs. Sometimes short-term work will lead to full-time work. So you really never know, but we recommend both those conversations and those experiences as very valuable ways to explore more during your relaunch. We're going to pause here. We've been through how to begin, where do I begin, and then how to test drive and explore. Those are the first two sections of our webinar today. And I'm wondering if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them into the chat. We have our second two sections coming up, so we can proceed right to those if no one has any burning questions right now.
And it looks like we're probably good to continue at the moment. So wonderful. And that was a lot. And I know during the pandemic, it's been such a challenge, and we feel a little bit housebound. But what I have found is that while we're home and we're constantly on a screen, that is opening up a whole world of opportunity from your living room. So and there are also numerous podcasts. I want to mention that. I try to get out every day and walk, because that's been important for my well-being. And we have a dog, so that helps me. But podcasts while I walk shed all kinds of ideas, that really makes me realize, oh, there's just so much out there. So even though we ourselves cannot physically get together and share as much, all of these workshops and conferences and podcasts are still happening in the virtual space. I did just notice a couple quick messages popped in, so I just want to make sure before we continue.
Yeah, the first one is, do you feel like both of the Designing Your Life books are helpful? And I would say yes. You can view them more as companion guides rather than one and then two, like a sequel. It's not, it's not a drama or anything like that. So we recommend them to a lot of people. You can get them out of the library and, first just see if you even think it would be helpful. In particular, the first book has an entire chapter on prototyping, and we really think that's a great chapter if you read nothing else.
So somebody was just asking about VIPs, and it was skills was the last one, strengths, by the way, for that. So and also whether to work with a coach. Of course you can, and that's what we're here for. So if I think it can be helpful to talk through where you're getting stuck. And anyway, we're obviously free. It's a free resource. And you can certainly, there are many coaches in the world out there. Dana and I are happy to talk you through it, and we have worksheets, reflection exercises to that end. And incorporating personal reasons in your elevator pitch. Yes, we're going to talk about this in a moment, actually, about the personal reasons for the break, or how to talk about that in re-entering. So that's a very good question. And
saying more about volunteer work remotely, I think, there's just basically some common sense there, obviously in-person things or opportunities with people who are sick is not an idea that works right now. You could reach out to volunteer coordinators at various nonprofits and say, do you have anything that does work remotely? Somebody just posted volunteermatch.org is a great one. So if you want to make an appointment with one of us, we could brainstorm specifically about what you're interested in, but I think it's safe to say a number of opportunities are limited right now, but hopefully within the next few months, that will be that will be changing. And yeah, I think we can return because we're going to discuss the elevator pitch coming up. Oh, somebody asked, if you don't hear back from an alum after a couple of weeks, should you move on or try to connect them on LinkedIn, trying not to be too aggressive? Great question. I think my general rule is you can reach out, you can follow up one more time, send the initial email, follow up once. And if they don't answer, this is probably not a good time for them. And so I would let it go then and maybe try again in a couple more months.
Mhm.
So,
But
yeah.
yes, you can certainly reach out on LinkedIn, of course. Yes, to your question on that. And then after that, it may not be a good time. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
all right, moving right along.
Okay,
And
we'll
we might
address
have
the
more
rest
time
of,
for questions.
yeah,
Pardon?
we'll address the rest of the questions at the
Yes.
end. Okay.
Very good. And please, yes, do ask your questions. That's why we're here. Moving on to this next portion, what is specific about relaunchers that, a lot of what we've been talking about, you could say, well, that's for really job searching in general, which is true. What about relaunching specifically? Well, the first and biggest probably hurdle facing all of us as relaunchers is confidence. And you could say that that goes as well for job searchers, right? Confidence is behind so much. But with relaunch, it's unique because you have life experience at this point. You're not 21 and you've taken a break for whatever the reasons are, but you've also lived life and you have a maturity, a perspective. And I am struck by, I was reflecting the other day on Nancy Pelosi, and it's well known that she had 5 children within 6 years. She now has 9 grandchildren. And I remember her saying, yeah, I know how to handle tantrums and how to mediate disputes. And, I'm definitely very confident about that capacity. And I thought, that wasn't something she learned in politics. She learned that in her personal life. And so remember that you're always learning, whether you're in the workplace or not, you're learning. And that is what we bring back into the mix. We still face the confidence issues. Definitely, we all do. But I'm just saying that's something to remember specifically in your relaunch is confidence is not intrinsic. It is something we learn and we can improve on it and build on it. And I find also that when you take action and take small actions, set your goals, this can also build your confidence. And it's an iterative process. And then your confidence helps you move forward. So remembering that, I do think it's important to take small steps. Don't set the bar too high. And this is something, if you have read the Designing Your Life books, also they remind you constantly, don't set the bar too high, then you're setting yourself up for failure. Make small goals, achieve them, and then move up and move the bar up that way. And SMART goals you've probably heard of: specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-centered. And this is very important as you're approaching getting back into the workforce again, is not just waking up and saying, today, I'm going to send out my resume to 10 places and I'm hoping to have an interview by the end of the week. And it isn't even, I'm hoping to re-enter and have a job within a month, right? These are gradual things and it's a process. So I do want to remind everybody about that. And I also want to say that part of the confidence with relaunching can often be, well, I've had health issues, or my family has, had health issues, or I've been raising young children. I have spit up on my shoulder. I feel like a mess. I'm not that competent, put together, poised individual that we all see on social media, right? Instagram. I was listening to a mom the other day and she said, oh, good God, if I had had Instagram when I was a young mother, I don't think I could have handled it because everybody looks so perfect and put together. And she said, I was often in my bathrobe in the middle of the day still. I just didn't have the house cleaned up. All of this. So remember that we curate our social media images and that is not the reality. And I feel it's very important to just remind yourself that people that you worked with will remember you as a coworker, as a professional. And so however you may be feeling today, and we all go through this, trust me, even Dana and I today went through, do you think this scarf looks better? Do you think that color looks better? We all go through this, right? So something that I want to share with you, Carol Fishman Cohen started iRelaunch, and we've talked about this before and we'll mention it again. It's a wonderful resource as you're reentering the workplace. And she shared at a conference in front of over 1,000 people, a slide of herself. So here she is at the presenting at the conference. This was several years ago, in her suit, looking very professional. And she said, I'm going to share a slide with you all to let you know that this is what I looked like 3 years ago. And she was in her minivan, all hunched up in her hat, her gloves, her coat, no makeup, no glamour. And she said, but this is me doing carpool. And I'm sharing it with you all so that you know we all have lives, personas, and then we have our professional persona. And remember this, the people you worked with before will remember you professionally. They will not remember you brushing your teeth in your bathrobe with whatever, looking, you know, akimbo. So I think that's important. And you also need accountability partners. Last thing I'm going to say right now before we move on. Accountability is very important. It's all too easy. And we know we do this, particularly as women, we do this, where we say, yeah, I definitely want to get back into, it's really important to me. I want to get back into work. And we talk about it and we talk about it. But if there's no set goal and there's no accountability group accountability partner, it's very easy to let the weeks slip by and the months slip by. And life gets in the way, right? That whole John Lennon quote, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. And so I think that's important. And I want to stress that. And we're happy to be your accountability folks here if you need someone. And final thought on confidence. And I know we can make the whole hour about that, but maybe it's helpful to you to just jot down everything you've overcome, all the barriers you've overcome. And it's really important to this very soul searching, what have I overcome? I can do this, write it down. And every strength you perceive about yourself, and ask other people to feed that into you too, because sometimes we forget. It's very easy to forget what we're good at, or downgrade what we're good at, or say, well, that's nothing, that type of thing. So have other people who you know and trust give you input, and maybe also start an outline about your ideal day. That can be helpful. My ideal day starts this way, then I do this, somewhere in the day this happens, and by the end of the day, this is how I feel. That can also be very, very helpful. All right, next, moving on.
Sure. Well, confidence is a big one. It's something we talk to so many alums about. And one thing that often is a piece of the confidence is, wow, I'm really rusty on technology, or I just haven't kept up, or I really have no idea how to do a PowerPoint presentation. So if you're feeling like that, this certainly the pandemic is a great time, or as you prepare for a return to work, you might need to update your tech skills. It depends if you're going into a field that is highly technical, of course, then you might need more. But if that's not the case, you still need some basic ones, because your office may communicate via the Slack platform, or you might need to be able to quickly do an Excel spreadsheet. So a few ideas there that might help. Oftentimes local libraries have great courses on basic technology platforms, or things that you might need to know. So check your local library. There are also a lot of online platforms like Coursera and edX and Udacity, and they often have free courses on technology topics. So that's a great place to check out and try one. And you can also then put it on your resume, or you could even talk about it in the conversation. And it shows initiative, and it gives you some credibility. Like, I'm serious about this return to work here. I've actually been doing a number of things to update my skills. For example, I took a class on creating powerful PowerPoint presentations. So that's a really good thing to do. And it also increases your confidence. And finally, if you have kids in your household or kids in your neighborhood, they're often really terrific resources, because they're technology natives and digital natives, I guess is what we call them. And they might be willing to do a little bit of what I like to call reverse mentoring. And you could even hire someone in your neighborhood to come over and sit with you while you practice certain things, and just help you out in a very low-key way. So those are some resources for updating your technology skills, making sure that you're comfortable in a digital world. And it really, if that's one of your areas where you're feeling not confident, that's a really concrete one where you can take steps to feel much more confident about it. And if you have more questions about that, we're happy to discuss your particular questions as well. And the next one.
Thank you. And I have to just take a second here and say, one of the things that Dana and I love so much about working with the Wellesley community is you all are sharing in the chat some wonderful additional ideas and resources. So thank you for that. And I believe Susan mentioned that her Wellesley chapter, her club, was offering a PowerPoint workshop, and that's wonderful. And thank you, Anne, for, I was just about to reiterate, Coursera, edX, Udacity were some of the tech course offerings that Dana just touched on. So thank you all.
Also lynda.com, but I think that one is paid, but there are some
Yep.
There are some ways you can get a free subscription.
Yep.
So.
Yep. And LinkedIn Learning sometimes offers things for free as well. So
yeah.
So the gap. So this is often the biggest question that is our fear barrier is, how do I address the gap? Because as I've said to you, between us, Dana had 12 years, I had 8 years. Some people have 20 years. Some people have 25 years. I mean, it doesn't, the gap itself could be 3 months or 20 years, right? It doesn't matter the length of it, right? It's still the getting back on the bicycle feeling, the, and how do I talk about the fact, you know, that I have been out, right? And who's going to want to hire me? There's all of these fears start, you know, just cropping up, and all of our negative self-talk on our shoulder just kicks up. So I want to say first and foremost, to address the gap, yes, it's the elephant in the room. You can't ignore it and pretend you didn't take a gap, but don't apologize for it. Don't be ashamed of it, and don't let it take over either. Don't dwell on it. So what you want to do in a cover letter or in an interview situation or elevator pitch, as we've discussed earlier, you know, talking to people, is to be able to say, not, well, I took a break. I wasn't really happy in the first place. Then I took a break. I you know, ostensibly was, you know, caring for my family. And then, well, and then this came up and then this came, no. Just, you know, say very succinctly, yes, I did take a break of about 6 years to take care of family. And I'm really excited. I'm so excited and energized to get back into the workforce. And over that time that I was on break, I did do a ton of volunteering, and I was on this board or volunteered with that organization or what have you. And that gave me this additional skill set, or I've brushed up my skills in blah, 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 blah. And that's why I feel particularly well suited for this role now that we're talking about, or this is why in my informational interview, this is why I now am ready to get back into this and focus on the future, not on the past. And I think, you know, again, I'll think of a Wellesley alum who's a very, very close friend of mine. We've known each other since we were babies. And she, I forget how many years, probably about 15 years raising her kids. And then they were off to college and so on. But in the meantime, she had moved the family due to spouse's work from New Jersey to China to the Netherlands to London, back to California, and all of these, and each time get the dogs situated, get the kids, you know, set up with school, figure out, you know, where they all kinds of details, right? So in other words, chief of staff, operations expert, all the logistics she had attended to, so all of these things. And I said to her, why are you beating yourself up about not having anything on your resume? First of all, you have done a lot of volunteering. And second of all, look at all you've accomplished. And you can certainly reflect that in resume, cover letter, et cetera, and certainly on your LinkedIn, to talk about your knowledge of global moves and about all these, you know, school systems and different things you have you've done. And I think that really helped. And also, by the way, I'll mention, she took advantage of Wells Fargo relaunch, back to work relaunching on onboarding, you know, program. So they have returnships now in a lot of organizations, and it's not just the financial ones like Wells Fargo. There are health related ones. There are, you know, in different sectors, they have this returnship idea. So keep that in mind. So remember, you're coming back. Yes, there's a gap, but you have all of that experience along the way. And how to, you know, how to address that. I think we've talked about that. So I don't want to dwell on that. Let's move on. The next specific to relaunching.
The next specific question seems like a really minor one, but we get it a lot. if I'm going for a job interview, what do I wear? And so this is not something that we want you to have to worry about. This is not something we want you to have to spend a lot of money on. Really and truly what you wear should be the least interesting thing about you. I mean, perhaps unless you're going for a job in high fashion, but that's going to be a small subset. So when you think about your clothing, your hairstyle, your eyeglasses, you do want to find something kind of basic. Some people do the capsule wardrobe idea where you have a jacket and a suit and a couple of white shirts or blouses and a couple of accessories, and you mix and match. You want something that looks professional, something that looks relatively current, none of those blazers from the 1980s with the big shoulder pads. Those have to be gone, and something that makes you feel really good. And again, you want people to be listening to what's coming out of your mouth. You want them to remember something you said. You want them to remember your enthusiasm or that interesting experience you had. You don't want them to be saying, oh, the person with the loud green plaid jacket. That's just, not the goal here. So fashion should be something that you can get some help on. We're happy to recommend stores, or we're happy to answer specific questions, but it's really not what you want people to remember about you.
Okay, and I am going to circle back really briefly because I forgot. I was going to put some keywords together, and I saw some questions coming up, so I just want to address in the gap. If it was for health reasons, you can say, and I wouldn't dwell on here's my health history, but you can say, I took the break for family health crisis or for family health issues. They don't have to know it's your health issues. It's family related, and generally, well, it's illegal to ask further questions, and they won't. But you do need to explain that it's been resolved, thankfully resolved, and I am eager to get back to work now. So moving ahead, the next question that happens when you're reentering: full-time, part-time. And it is an important consideration to know what you are ready for, particularly those of us who have families in tow and families who expect us to do carpooling and driving them places and all of that. That's a consideration. However, be careful not to fall into what I sometimes hear a lot of women going through, which is, well, I want to get back to work, but I want it to be part-time, ideally, like maybe 9 to 2, 3 or 4 days a week, somewhere close to home. I mean, at this point, you've put up more barriers. You shut the door before you ever opened it. In other words, so be careful that you're open-minded, adaptable, and flexible, and maybe looking at a full-time job and deciding whether or not, if you get the offer, whether or not you're ready to take that full-time, or whether you can negotiate for something more flexible or days that meet your needs. Or right now, given that we're all in remote anyway, maybe that's a moot point right now, where it's full time, but you're in and out and running the carpool for 10 minutes and back and forth and all of that, if needed. But I would not get hung up on that. Now, that said, and Dana and I've had numerous conversations about this on our relaunches. I'll share with you that I had originally thought I would go back part-time. And my husband said, well, it'd be really great if you could find something full-time, because then you'd get, retirement and, benefits and this and that and the other. And I said, well, okay, but just keep in mind that means what happens after school with the kids, with all their activities, and who's going to drive them to that. And then we have to hire someone to do that. So just, making sure you thought that through. Oh no, he hadn't thought that through, so it's definitely something you have to communicate, be clear about. At the end of the day, ironically, as it worked out for me, as I was networking, several part-time opportunities popped up all at the same time. And so what I ended up doing, because I did want to get back to work so badly, is I did hire a babysitter to meet the school bus for 3 months and drive the kids places so that I could take these short-term part-time opportunities that were over an hour's drive each way, right? So I did that for short term, not forever, in order for me to get back into the workforce. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about the full-time, part-time. I also, over my shoulder here, I have Michelle Obama's book, which if you all haven't read it, highly recommend. She addresses a lot of what we're talking about today, because she was working, had a high-powered job, then said, I'm feeling torn now that I have children. Maybe I should cut back to part-time, tried part-time for a while, didn't like the way that was working out, because she said, I felt like I was working full-time hours for part-time paycheck. So then she, so all of these are changes, and we will be going through changes all the time, like a chambered nautilus that goes through different chambers. As you outgrow them, you move into the next one. And we're nothing if not adaptable as women. So you might find yourself full-time, part-time, full-time, part-time. But just be clear on what you want, and we can help you work out how to present that in your story.
Great. So the final topic that we put together when we thought about what are the specific concerns that we hear from people who are returning after a career break is really just the discussion about the interview. Because if you haven't interviewed in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you're going to feel rusty. You're going to wonder if things have changed. Certainly interviews now are virtual, and we did have a wonderful alum do a webinar, which is on the YouTube site that Becky mentioned, on how to present yourself professionally on virtual platforms. So you can check that out if you'd like. But the questions that the two most common questions, and I saw one of these in the chat, a lot of times when people come and want to talk about interviews, the questions are around, how do I explain the gap? So we definitely want to reiterate that that's a very individual thing, and we're here to help you test out the right wording for you. And you do want to practice it, literally practice it out loud, practice it into the mirror, practice it recording yourself on your phone, practice it with a friend who's also relaunching, practice it with us. But you want to be able to say that description very calmly, very confidently, and just, have it roll off your tongue. The other question that sometimes we get about interviews is, oh, what about ageism? I'm concerned about discrimination. I'm in my 50s, I'm in my 60s. And so that's something we can also talk about with regard to your specific situation. It's true that ageism exists. It would be simply not acknowledging the truth if we said, oh, it's not a problem. But we want to help you be able to describe your background in ways that are current, to be able to show how you can contribute, to remind you that most companies and organizations are looking to create teams, and teams need diversity of all kinds. So they need, recent grads and people with life experience on their teams. We can help you check to see if your way of talking about your experience includes some phrases that would not be helpful, such as, well, back in my day. We never want to say things like that. So we can help you present the most positive version of yourself. And if you find that you're interviewing at a place where they're simply dead set on hiring someone who's 28 and you're 48, well, you're probably not going to be that person. And so you have to move on. But I think it's important to acknowledge it exists, and then just work on what you can control about the way you present yourself. And that's what you can do with that. So that's the second big concern about interviews. And just one more reminder, many people make mock interview appointments with Becky and me, and this is one of our favorite things to do. I honestly believe that even one mock interview can help you so much. And even though it's artificial, you can say, I want to do a mock interview and pretend that I'm going to apply for a position at the Gates Foundation. Well, I've never worked there. I don't really know exactly what they're going to ask, but the actual process of going through a mock interview is incredibly helpful, and we love doing it. So feel free to reach out and make an appointment for that. Okay, so those are the concerns of specific concerns of relaunchers. And our final section is what is different in a pandemic.
And meanwhile, I know you're all very actively typing in the chat. I can see that. And I love the back and forth conversation and some of the points you're all bringing up. I made a note to get back to a few of the questions you've posed. So the pandemic, yes. Well, in many respects, everything we're covering today would be true, pandemic or no pandemic. But what's different now is all of the things are the same except intensified. So it's that much more important to be, using your network, to be talking to people, to be having these conversations, prototyping experiences, virtual space. All of that is making it that much more pressing, intensified, I should say. Remote work, we're pretty sure is here to stay in some capacity. So even though we're missing our coworkers and we want to be back physically in an office, it's unlikely that we will return to exactly how it used to be. Companies are shedding commercial real estate. It's costing a lot of money and it's empty right now. So that probably won't all come back. And the fact is, employers have seen it's possible to work effectively remotely. So I think we will probably have some hybrid in-person and remote in the future. Freelance work, gig economy, side hustles, whatever you want to call them, temporary contract work is definitely filling a lot of gaps right now and is a safer way for employers who aren't sure about their growth and aren't sure about their hiring trajectory to fill projects. And so that's good news for you because you can be one of those contract, short-term, try it out, as Dana was discussing earlier, strategic volunteering. And virtual projects are more ubiquitous, so that's going to be helpful as well. But applicant pools are also probably going to be larger because now it doesn't need to be that you're in Cambridge and you look around for a job in Cambridge. You could be looking all across the state or across the country for virtual work, right? So that's a change. So anyway, considerations for workplace changes.
Great. And continuing on that theme a little bit, when you are reaching out for virtual coffee chats, you obviously want to focus on the city that you'd like to live in, because that makes the most sense to build your network of people who share your professional interests in the same geographic area. But you want to be open-minded. I mean, if you want to live in Boston, but there's someone doing very interesting work in research work on a topic that fascinates you and they live in Texas, by all means, talk to them. You might actually learn something from that conversation that you bring back and bring up in an interview with someone, in the Boston area. So be open-minded about that. Down the street is the same as around the world, and you can talk to anyone, anywhere. And it might be helpful, but clearly, because you have to be efficient, you want to focus more of your efforts on where you'd like to live. Secondly, I think it can be very helpful for relaunchers, particularly if you have young children at home, to do some of these coffee chats from home. It kind of allows you to ease into the idea without having to get dressed, commute, find a sitter, things like that. The other thing is that we should all approach these conversations with empathy, but especially now, as Becky said, it's really intensified. You may have reached out to someone who is quite overwhelmed. Maybe they're taking care of someone in their family who's sick. Maybe they themselves have been sick and they're trying to recover. Maybe they're trying to work 3 jobs to make ends meet. So you really don't know. And that's why I said earlier, I think it's okay to follow up once. And if that doesn't work, then let it be for a while. But the flip side of that is some people are home and bored and would love the opportunity to give back, to speak with a Wellesley alum, to really feel like they're helping someone. And so it can be a great time for these virtual coffee chats as well. And we hope, as Becky mentioned earlier, that you'll pay it forward and maybe you'll be able to reach out and help someone. Maybe you had a career doing fundraising and you're hoping to change from that career, but maybe an alumna reaches out to you on the Hive because she would like to get into fundraising, and you can still help her with, sharing your stories from that time. So we are so glad to be able to provide the help, and we also hope that you'll help each other. So I'd love to ask everybody to put further questions into the chat now. I think you've been doing that. We're going to wrap up. So we went through where to begin. We went through how to test drive. We went through those specific areas that relaunchers ask a lot of questions about. And we went through what's a little bit different in the pandemic. I think our concluding thought that we'd like to leave you with is no one ever does this alone. So we are glad that you came together today to join us. And I want to let you know how Career Ed will help you. Certainly, we're going to send the link to this webinar with a list of resources, all the ones that we've mentioned and some additional ones. We'll send that out to everybody who registered. You can make an appointment with Becky and me anytime, and we hope you will, through Handshake. That's our platform to make appointments. And we also have career community advisors. There are 6 of them, although we're hiring a couple new ones, that specialize in different fields. So there are 6 different areas. So we generally recommend that you make an appointment with Becky or me first, and then maybe also a career community advisor. And you don't have to choose. We're not passing you off. You can talk to one of them and us. You can show your resume to one of them and us. Like, you know, for example, our colleague Destiny works with people who are interested in the creative economy, and she might have ideas for a resume for a graphic design role that she might be more expert on than Becky and I are. So you're welcome to talk to any of us at Career Education, and we really hope that you will. But you know, we also hope that you'll reach out beyond Wellesley too.
So, and I'm seeing a lot of chat, and I just want to say we can stay overtime. I know some of you may need to leave at 1. And so if I didn't get to any of your questions, if we haven't gotten to them yet, we'll be sure to address those in the upcoming, which will be on the recording still. And I did have some podcast recommendations, which we'll be sending along as well and in the resources. But in a final closing thought here, before we open it up for Q&A, personal advisory board. Think about that for a minute. You're all aware of advisory boards and nonprofit boards and corporate boards, but a personal advisory board, and this goes back to Dana's admonition to all of us to be selfish, right? So we need we need a board of advisors for ourselves. And what this means is not just one mentor. Maybe you're lucky and one person is a wonderful mentor and has been everything for you, but usually we find it's multiple mentors and people in all walks of life at different ages. And I find sometimes in my group of advisors, mentors, I find younger people can help me as much as older people who have been there before me, right? So younger people have a different perspective and they've done things in a different way or have insights. This goes into the tech ideas we talked about earlier. My kids are constantly saying, Mom, why are you doing it that way? This is the new way to do it, or, you know, that type of thing. But we can share, you know, our wisdom, having lived life with younger people. So it's a good back and forth. So the personal advisory board idea is, this could be, again, using the Wellesley Hive, seeking connections with people who have, you know, been in different stages, who graduated your year, 5 years before you, 5 years after you, that type of thing, which I find most helpful and really a key. Most people agree that what happens in our lives is largely due to people who took us under their wing or who shared their time and expertise and wisdom with us. So anyway, with that said,
There's some great questions coming in. There have been a couple of questions on resumes, and I just want to address it very generally, and we're happy to go over your resume with you. So if you're doing a reverse chronological resume and you haven't worked for the last 10 years, that's a little bit difficult. So 2 things I want to say. One, you know, experience is experience. It doesn't matter if you were paid for it or not. So if you do have any substantial volunteer commitments, you can include those as experience, and that's 100% okay. Secondly, you might try dividing your experience into 2 sections. One might say relevant experience and then additional experience. And that can be really helpful too, as a way of pulling up to the top experience that's more relevant to what you want to do. So we can, you know, be creative thinkers with you, creative partners with you. And if you want to send us a copy of what you have on your resume before you make an appointment with us, then we're more than welcome to do that. But that's just a couple of ideas that, it doesn't have to be paid experience. And in fact, the other piece of that, I guess, is this is not something you would put on a resume necessarily, but some parts of it you'll talk about. Like, for example, I've had a lot of experience with helping the grandparent generation with cancer, Parkinson's disease, and dementia. So I learned a lot about assisted living homes. Now, if I wanted to work at one of those, I would probably find a way to talk about that in my cover letter, just because I have a lot of familiarity with it. And that would help me get a job in the world of elder care. But it isn't that I actually already had a job or signed up for something like that. So that's a brief hint on the resume piece, and we're happy to talk about that further individually.
I wanted to mention, because I noticed resiliency and sort of feeling rebuffed by people not getting back to you, and this can be hard, right? So if I could, we'd have spent half an hour probably talking about resiliency, but I did have this quote to share with you, which I thought was really helpful. I heard it recently. When life shuts a door, open it again. It's a door. That's how they work. And just to, remind ourselves to another favorite quote I have right now is sometimes you have to let go of the picture of what you thought it would be like and learn to find joy in the story you are actually living. And I think that's a good reminder today where we all are in 9 months into this pandemic. And thinking about relaunching, I do think you've addressed the resume question, and I would say there's a question on LinkedIn as well. Same thing goes on LinkedIn. LinkedIn gives you a little more flexibility than a resume. It is a more dynamic, informal place for you to link media links. If you have something that you've recorded or something you've written or something you want to share, you can put that in. You can use I did, I am, whereas in a resume, we would say you don't use pronouns. And how to deal with a gap, I would say, again, this is same with a resume, but LinkedIn and resume offer you the option for a summary, a profile summary. And I think it can be a helpful exercise to come up with a brief one line about yourself too. Like, my superpower is, right? And think about that. Not that you're going to post my superpower is, but you have to think about it that way in terms of brevity. And because we get caught up, I think, in a lot of words about, this, and then this happened, and then that happened. And pretty soon it's a long paragraph. And instead, the gap really should be summarizing my skills and all that you've just learned from that Udemy course you took, or what you've been learning in a podcast or what have you. You're going to put those skills, summary, 10 years experience as marketer, looking to re-enter digital marketing space, or you can talk about it that way. Or you can say, using my past experience and now, bridging the gap with whatever course you took or certificate you have, and then, moving on to that. Let's see, what else?
I have a couple of questions that people have asked. I'm gonna answer. One was an advanced question about paying for certificate programs, online certificate programs. Is it worth it? Are they viewed favorably by employers? And I don't think there's a yes or no answer to that question. I think it really depends on what skills you're trying to build and what industry you're trying to enter. So there are a lot of things, for example, called coding boot camps. And if you need to learn to write code, then you probably need to do one of those, and they're not usually free. So I think when you're having your prototyping conversations and you're talking to people in the field, a great question would be, do you work with any people who did an online certificate program in digital marketing? How is that perceived? Do you think it's necessary? Can I learn it on the job? Or maybe you can ask the actual programs if they have some alums of those programs that you could speak with, and ask them, what did you learn? How did you find it? Do you think you learned things here that you couldn't have learned otherwise? So happy to talk specifically with you about what you're thinking about, but that's a brief answer to that question. And then the other one, I saw a few people talking about on the chat. As you all know, it's hard to speak and read at the same time. So we're doing our best here. Is people asking about starting their own company and being an entrepreneur. And this is something we'd love to do a webinar about. It's actually on our list. And our colleague, Christina Brighter, is our career community advisor. That's what I mentioned before, for business consulting, finance, and entrepreneurship. She's an entrepreneur herself. And she has, she's probably a great person to talk to as a first step about starting your own business. Certainly reaching out through the Hive and LinkedIn and finding other alums who have started their own businesses is great. And it's an area that we are working on in terms of building our resources. And we would love to offer a webinar sometime in 2021 about that. So if you have ideas of who would be a good presenter, we welcome them. And, but so that was, I know a couple of people talked about starting their own businesses.
We were discussing it just this morning in our staff meeting, as a matter of fact,
were.
and women in particular. And so we talk a lot with women from Wellesley about wanting to start their own businesses. And the reason for that is so that you get to call the shots and you have flexibility and control. And I think that's important, what we'd all like. So it also, though, is to be noted that I've also heard from women who have started their own businesses that was incredibly time consuming and a lot of energy. So it's something that we'd like to do, but it can be all consuming. So keeping that in mind. But so I think if you save there's a lot of conversation about saving chat. So I can probably save it and send it out as part of the resources, I think, too. But I would think under the 3 dots at the bottom, you should be able to hit save chat.
Yeah. Or at least we can include the resources that people suggested in the chat when we send out our resources, Becky. And that will be in about a week that we send that out, and it will be posted on our website. So we have a colleague who edits these and makes them look beautiful. So
and for those of you who asked, I'll be sending the podcast out as well, but a couple very good ones for the relaunch phase of your life is Repurpose Your Career podcast by Mark Miller. He does a career pivot podcast, and the iRelaunch podcast, hands down, is fantastic. And sign up for the free email too that iRelaunch offers. It's full of links to good articles each week, and their podcasts are helpful. There are many others in terms of New Rules of Work is another good one. Squiggly Careers podcast from Amazing If.
We'll include all of those.
Anyway, we don't need to go through them all, but yeah, so just to mention that, just trying to quickly get to some of the questions we had.
Somebody was asking about Handshake. So the website is joinhandshake.com, and you need to have your Wellesley College login information. Just send an email to Becky or me if you're not able to do it, but that's where you get started with that. And that is it's a little bit unfortunate that Handshake and the Hive both begin with H because I don't know why, it seems slightly more confusing, but Handshake is our, where we have, where you're able to make an appointment, and the Hive is Wellesley's own networking platform that Becky described when we were talking about conversations to have with other alums.
And I'm just trying to think what else I jotted down here. Resume gaps, accountability groups. That was a good question. So again, Dana and I would be more than happy to be your sounding board and sort of keeping a regular, every few weeks checking in with us if you wanted to set up appointments, with us. But if you are looking for something more like a book club, accountability club, relaunch club, I would say your Wellesley Club chapter, your local Wellesley chapter, is a good starting point. I know several Wellesley alums have used the group there to sort of say, hey, anyone else interested in starting up a group to do accountability of relaunching into work or starting our own companies or what have you, right? I also, as I mentioned earlier, my good friend from California, who's a Wellesley alum, she said she just got together with some other friends and Wellesley alums, I believe all of them, just informally, and they set up their own accountability group, sort of a job cheerleading each other on group. So you can go at it a number of ways. I think the really key part of that is not too big. I think it's important for it not to be too large of a group. And it needs to be a safe space that you feel you can trust these fellow travelers who are going through what you're going through, and not feel like it's one more place where you have to put on the everything's perfect mask, if you will. I think that's very important for making progress.
Someone's asked a question about the worksheets to start exploring. Are they on the career website? We do have them on our career education website under, I believe, career exploration. We also, but I think that what Becky and I like to do is have a conversation with somebody first and then maybe direct you to whichever we think would be most helpful. Some of you may be familiar with Strengthsfinder. It's a low cost, but it does have a cost tool that is quite well known out there and quite highly respected. So sometimes we recommend that people do that. There's also a free version that's similar called the High 5 test, high and then the number 5 and then test. But we'd love to talk to you, and then maybe we could identify what skills and worksheets and things would be the most helpful to you. And we also would reiterate that the Designing Your Life books have a lot of those things in them, and they are very helpful self-assessment tools.
Yeah, and they're free as well. And I'm not gonna, I could search them and cut them, paste them in the chat, but honestly, we'll send those along as well. I'll make myself a note to be sure we don't forget. But the Designing Your Life, Designing Your Work Life worksheets and exercises are helpful. And honestly, one of the things I find to be most helpful can just be your own brainstorm, your own reflection of thinking back, right? And this is really important to think way back sometimes. I had a conversation recently with a Wellesley alum, and she said, I want to feel like I did when I was at Wellesley. I want to feel that same passion for what I'm doing. And so thinking back, and this was 15 years earlier, or 20 years, or, whatever it is for you, to think back to even before Wellesley. My earliest memories when I was 4 or 5 years old were puppet shows. I loved my collection of puppets and I wanted to be a puppeteer. So did I turn out to be a puppeteer? No. But the important part of that exercise was thinking back to what was important to me, taking apart, what is a puppet show, telling stories, different characters, different roles, different, so if I'm honest with myself, having that as a core piece of what I do or have in my life is important. So I think sometimes reflecting back to that can be a helpful starting point. But yes, as Dana said, there are numerous questionnaires, worksheets, and they're free, and we can share those with you. Some questions are on the website, but not everything is. So just to let you know, yeah. So it's almost 1:15. I just want to be respectful that if people have things to move on to, we're more than happy at any time. You have our emails, bking2@wellesley.edu, and Dana's is dkeep@wellesley.edu. And we're here for you. So please do, if you still have questions or have a specific situational thing you'd like to talk through, we're more than happy to do that with you.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for all your excellent questions. Thank you for helping each other. We wish you a safe and healthy end of the year and holiday season, and we look forward to connecting.
There's an awful lot riding on 2021 right now, isn't there, Dana?
Yeah, that's for sure.
But I do feel optimistic. I think, well, hey, it's a low bar to clear from 2020, isn't it? So 2021 is definitely going to be better. So, and the thing is, you're not alone. We're all here with you. So thank you again for being here today. And we'll be following up in probably the next 4 or 5 days with the link and further resources. So thank you all. All right.
All the best. Take care.
And I'm